Well, tonight we're going to talk about the solar system. The solar system is one of these marvelously engineered parts of the creation. But today, natural science tries to explain away its origin, much like they do everything that God made. They try to explain away the clockwork precision that is found in the solar system with various models and theories. So we're going to take a tour of the solar system tonight, going through the various planets and moons, talking about the unique design features in the solar system, using it as an opportunity to reflect on God's glory. The heavens declare the glory of God, but also to help us better understand the arguments that are used today to try to disprove that God created the world. So we're going to just dive right in. But one thing I want you to remember is that with each new discovery that's made in astronomy, the design is becoming more and more evident. The handiwork of the Creator is revealed with every new discovery that's made today in astronomy. So we're going to be looking at some of these new discoveries. We're going to be looking at the uniqueness of the solar system that defies naturalistic explanations. Well, astronomical bodies were formed on the fourth day of creation. Genesis 1:14-19 describes their various purposes. And God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. And let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth." And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars also. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. You know, it is noteworthy that for 5 days, God created the earth and its inhabitants, but spent only 1 day creating all of the rest of the cosmos. He spent 1 day creating just the flying creatures and sea creatures. Same amount of time he spent making the entire rest of the cosmos. So arguably, the flying creatures and sea creatures are as complex as all of the rest of cosmos combined. Well, humans have long struggled to explain the precision that we find in the cosmos through various cosmological models. This is Nikolai Copernicus, who is responsible for our current model of the solar system and is considered the founder of modern astronomy. He referred to the cosmos as built for us by the best and most orderly workman of all. Interestingly, rather than chaos and randomness and disorder that one would expect in a universe birthed from a great cosmic accident like the Big Bang, we find clockwork precision at every level in the cosmos. The solar system, as we're going to review, consists of the sun and 8 planets, 4 terrestrial planets or rocky planets, 4 gas giants, plus there are dwarf planets, asteroids, meteorites, comets, and all. Well, astronomers have determined that the other planets in our solar system stabilize the distance of the Earth from the sun, keeping the Earth from approaching too close or moving too far away from the sun. They also protect the Earth from comets, meteors, and asteroids. God created for us a remarkable solar system, positioned around the sun that was perfectly formed. Our space telescopes and spacecrafts have given us close-up views of these planets shown here. These are all pictures from spacecrafts. We now see the solar system like no one else has before. It is very fortunate to live in a time and a place when technologies have developed that allow us to see parts of God's creation no one ever saw before. Prior to now, these planets were just seen as pinpoints of light, not distinguishable from the stars, except that they moved. They were the wanderers, the planets. Truly, God's handiwork has been revealed to us like no other time in the history of the earth. While the solar system is masterfully engineered, secular scientists claim that it formed by purely natural processes from nebulae. This is a nebula. A nebula are gas and dust clouds that are believed to be the remains or remnants of stars that have exploded or gone supernova. Many of these nebula are massive. Within the Orion constellation, we see here, we find the Orion Nebula, which spans 13 light years, which means traveling at the speed of light at 186,000 miles per second, it would take 13 years to get from one side of this nebula to the other side. These nebula are beautiful components of the galaxy. Just beautiful. I love these pictures of nebula. I've often used these as the images on my computer. Well, secular scientists claim that our solar system, both the sun and the planets, formed 4.6 billion years ago from one of these nebula through natural processes alone. The theory asserts that as the nebula, like this one, rotated due to regional movements within the galaxy, it collapsed or became condensed somehow and flattened into a disk. A central bulge in the middle then formed and became our sun. Smaller collections of material then became the various planets. This is called the nebula model of the formation of the solar system and or of stars. Well, there are a number of theories put forth to explain the mysterious collapse of the nebula that formed our solar system. Some say it collapsed under its own gravity. Others invoke cooling to reverse the natural tendency of gases to expand. This is actually a long-standing theory. Several people have postulated this all the way back to the 1700s, have put forth these kinds of theories, believing that it either collapsed under its own gravity or that cooling caused it to contract, flatten, and begin to spin more rapidly. However, there's a major problem with this theory. It violates some basic laws of physics. Gas and dust clouds do not collapse or become more condensed. They expand through diffusion. They will spread out and continue to spread out further and further until they fill their space. Gas and dust, gas clouds expand. They do not contract. Fred Whipple stated in The Mystery of Comets precisely how a section of interstellar cloud collapses gravitationally into a star is still a challenging theoretical problem. Astronomers have yet to find an interstellar cloud in the actual process of collapse. Dr. Don DeYoung, shown here, has a PhD in physics from Iowa State and is a professor and department chair at Grace College. He is also the president of the Creation Research Society. He says, the complete birth of a star has never been observed. The principles of physics demand some special conditions for star formation, and also for a long time period. A cloud of hydrogen gas must be compressed to a sufficiently small size so that gravity dominates. He continues. In space, however, almost every gas cloud is light years in size, hundreds of times greater than the critical size needed for a stable star. As a result, outward gas pressure causes these clouds to spread out further, not contract. These nebula just spread further and further and further apart. Danny Faulkner holds a PhD in astronomy from Indiana University and taught at the University of South Carolina, Lancaster, for 26 years. He serves as the editor of the Creation Research Society, Quarterly, and has published over 100 papers in peer-reviewed journals. He now works as a researcher and an author at Answers in Genesis. He said this: most astronomers believe that the clouds, these nebula, gradually contract under their own weight to form stars. The process has never been observed, but if it did occur, it would take many human lifetimes. He continues, it is known that clouds do not spontaneously collapse to form stars. The clouds possess considerable mass, but they are so large that their gravity is very feeble. Any decrease in size would be met by an increase in gas pressure that would cause the cloud to expand. Well, again, gases expand until they will evenly fill their space. They do not magically compress. The ability for gravitational contraction and or cooling to account for this phenomena has led to another theory, that a nearby supernova, shown here, might have caused the nebula to become compressed sufficiently. An obvious problem, however, with this theory, with the nebula theory in general, is that it requires pre-existing stars. Remember, the nebula is thought to be from a star that went supernova and left behind this gas and dust cloud. Then the best theory they've come up with to explain the compression of one of these nebula to get stars to birth is an explosion of another star. What about those first stars? Well, the other bodies in the solar system, the asteroids, planetesimals, and planets, are believed to have formed through a nebula as well by a process they call accretion. As the gas and dust coalesced, larger grains of dust began to form. These stuck together to become rocks, which had even greater gravity. They became bigger rocks, sticking to other rocks, which became asteroids. Asteroids obtained larger, more gravity, and they're starting to stick together to become planetesimals, which then become planets. During this accretion process, small grains stick to one another via electromagnetic forces in the beginning until they are massive enough to attract each other by gravity to eventually form planetesimals on into planets. Well, the nebula theory is said to account for a number of features of the solar system. Those are that the shape of the solar system is flat, is said to be explained by the nebula theory. The counterclockwise orbit of the planets is said to be well explained by this. All planets orbit the sun in a disk, a flat disk called the plane of the ecliptic, except for Pluto, if you want to consider Pluto a planet. There's some debate on that. Some people don't like Pluto. I think Pluto's cool. And they say that it also explains the existence of the inner rocky planets, the fact that the 4 planets on the interior are rocky and the gas giants are further away from the sun, they say is also well supported by the nebula theory. Being closer to the sun made it impossible for things like water and volatile gases to condense, and so only rocky planets were formed. Further away from the sun, being cooler, gases were able to condense, forming the gas giants. So they say these aspects of the solar system are well explained by the nebula theory. However, the physics of it doesn't work. You can get planetesimals, they say, but not planets. Martin Harwit says in Astrophysical Concepts, once these planetesimals have been formed, further growth of planets may occur through gravitational accretion into large bodies. Just how that takes place is not understood. The physics does not support it. Furthermore, the nebula theory and the movement necessary to create the flattened disk were based on previous models of the solar system. However, we now know that the solar system is traveling around the galaxy at an average speed of 514,000 miles per hour. So the newer model, a more accurate model of the solar system, that accurately describes the movement that we now know is happening, is referred to as the helical model of the solar system. Watch this. Pretty cool. Helical model of the solar system, again based on calculations that the solar system is moving around our galaxy, the Milky Way, at 514,000 miles per hour. That's 143 miles per second. So the sun is being dragged around the galaxy with pulling all the planets with it in tow. Amazing, right? Well, the question we need to ask is this. What does the evidence support? Does it support the nebula model, or does it support a biblical model? The biblical model says that the solar system formed recently by an intelligent creator to provide a habitable earth. What does the evidence best support? Well, according to the nebula theory, every moon or planet formed along similar lines and should not be too different from each other. They should all conform to a single pattern. Is this actually what we find in the solar system? Let's take us a little tour of the solar system to see if we find great similarity in the solar system, as we should. If all the planets formed from this same cloud of gas and dust, planets should be very similar to one another, made out of similar stuff. The closer they are to one another, the more similar they should be. So let's see if that's true. We're going to take us a little tour of the solar system, noting its design features and uniqueness that decries creation. So again, the 4 outer planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, are called the gas giants. Note here from this diagram how big Jupiter is in comparison to the Earth. Jupiter's diameter is more than 11 times that of the Earth. 11 times that of the Earth. But even the gas giants like Jupiter are dwarfed when compared to the sun. Jupiter is about 1/10 the diameter of the sun. I started to give Jupiter's volume on this. Well, I have a note on Jupiter's volume, but I believe that number is incorrect, so I hate to state it. My note here says it's 318 times Earth's volume, but that is not correct. I'd have to look that up. There's something wrong with that figure there. I don't recall what it is exactly. But look how big the sun is in comparison to Jupiter. Well, let's take a little tour. First, we're going to start with the terrestrial planets. Again, those include Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. So let's take a look at Mercury. Mercury is the closest planet to the sun. Smaller than all other planets except for Pluto. Even smaller than Ganymede and Titan, the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. Temperature on Mercury ranges from 840 degrees to minus 180 degrees Fahrenheit. And it looks much like our moon. If you did not know this was a picture of Mercury, you would assume this was a picture of the moon. This was taken by one of our spacecrafts. We've taken all the pictures, the vast majority of the pictures I will show you have been taken by spacecrafts up close to these planets. This was taken by the Messenger spacecraft back in 2008. Here's a colorized image of Mercury from the Mariner 10 spacecraft from 1974 and 1975. That streak you see in this, by the way, is just an area that they didn't manage to take pictures of, so it's just kind of left blank. Well, the Mariner 10 probe took a number of measurements, which were some big surprises. Mercury's gravity and other properties were measured by the Mariner 10 probe, and it was discovered to have the highest known density of all planets, other than the Earth. Problem is, Mercury's too small to have such a high density. Its small size means it doesn't have a strong enough gravitational field and should not have compacted all its material into such a high density. In fact, up to 75% of the radius of Mercury is thought to be represented by an iron core, shown here in a cutout view produced by NASA. Well, the solution to this, to Mercury's mystery, is described by Taylor in Solar System, Evolution of a New Perspective. He says the driving force behind previous attempts to account for Mercury has been to fit the high density of the planet into some preferred overall solar system scheme. It has become clear that none of these proposed models work, and the high density is conveniently accommodated by the large impact hypothesis, which makes Mercury unique. Thus, the solution for Mercury's unusual density is known as the large impact hypothesis. It is believed that early in its history, an asteroid must have crashed into Mercury, the lighter material must have been stripped away, leaving behind the dense planet we see today. This is an artist's conception showing a celestial body about the size of the moon, slamming into it at great speed. Well, cosmic collisions, this hypothetical solution for Mercury's unusual density is known as the large impact hypothesis. Interestingly, cosmic collisions like this are invoked to explain most of the unusual features in the solar system. So many, in fact, that we might consider them to have superpowers. Well, Mariner 10 also discovered that Mercury has a magnetic field. This was back in, again, 1974 and 1975, which was a huge mystery for decades. If it's billions of years old, it can't have a magnetic field. Magnetic fields decay unless the core is molten. But it's too small and too old to have a molten core. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory stated in May 2007. Again, this is a decades-long mystery. They say researchers working with high-precision planetary radars, including the Goldstone Solar System radar of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Pasadena, California, have discovered strong evidence that the planet Mercury has a molten core, after all. The finding explains a more than 3 decades-old planetary mystery that began with the flight of Mariner 10 spacecraft. The research appears in this week's issue of the journal Science. Well, scientists, they continue, had not expected to find a magnetic field on Mercury. Planetary magnetic fields are associated with molten cores, and the prevailing theory was The planet was too small to have a molten core. Scientists theorized that Mercury consisted of a silicate mantle surrounding a solid iron core. The iron was considered solid, or so the theory went, because small planets like Mercury cool off rapidly after their formation. If Mercury followed this pattern, this core should have frozen long ago. It shouldn't have a molten core, and thus shouldn't have a magnetic field. Mercury defies explanation. If the nebula theory is true, it can't be dense, but it is. It can't have a magnetic field, but it does. It can't have a molten core, but it does. Paul said in 1 Corinthians that God has chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise, and God has chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty. Well, let's look at Venus. It should be very similar to the Earth. Both planets supposedly formed at the same time, at roughly the same place, from the same material, by the same natural processes, should be very similar in size, mass, and composition. Venus was recorded by the Jupiter-bound Galileo spacecraft shortly after its gravity-assisted flyby of Venus in 1990. Galileo's glimpse of the veiled planet shows its swirling sulfuric acid clouds. Its atmosphere is primarily carbon dioxide with clouds of concentrated sulfuric acid. A massive greenhouse effect makes Venus the hottest place in the solar system, 900 degrees Fahrenheit, even hotter than Mercury. It also has a massive atmospheric pressure of 90 atmospheres, 90 times the pressure that we experience right here at sea level. And it has no magnetic field. Well, a big mystery in explaining the origin of Venus is that it rotates backwards. It rotates retrograde or clockwise with respect to its orbit. Other planets rotate counterclockwise. Explanations for the backward rotation has included gravitational braking of a tidal bulge, but Venus doesn't have a tidal bulge. It's almost perfectly round. Well, today's explanation, Venus was formed as predicted by the nebula accretion model, but then an asteroid hit it and spun it around the wrong way. There's, in fact, though, no evidence for this collision. Venus's axial tilt is only 2 degrees from perfectly perpendicular to the plane of the ecliptic. Its orbit is the most circular in the solar system. The only evidence that it was ever struck by an asteroid is that its backward rotation contradicts the nebula theory. What we aren't being told about Venus, it should be very similar to the Earth, but it has no magnetic field, and its crust structure is very different. Its surface is obviously young, and it rotates the wrong way. Well, the Earth, we don't want to have a tour of the solar system without stopping by the Earth. Earth is a very, very, very special place. It spins at just the right speed. A 24-hour period gives us darkness for a time, which is a good thing for rest. But if it were slower, like around every 10 days, for example, we would have long dark periods, long cold periods. Faster would cause violent winds. Its axial tilt gives us moderate seasons. Its circular orbit gives us climate stability. It's the perfect distance from the sun. It's the perfect temperature, allowing for liquid water. All of these factors and many more are necessary for Earth's habitability because, as God said through the prophet Isaiah in Isaiah 45:18, Isaiah said, "Thus saith the Lord, that created the heavens, God himself that formed the earth and made it, he hath established it. He created it not in vain, he formed it to be inhabited. I am the Lord, and there is none else." Well, our atmosphere is also very important. It protects us from deadly radiation, and it gives us air to breathe. A thicker atmosphere, or one with a different composition, could produce a massive greenhouse effect, like we've seen on other planets. The Earth is covered with water. The waters above, that would be atmospheric water vapor, and the waters below, that were both created on the third day of creation. The oceans cover 71% of the surface, and water is truly a wonder of chemistry. There is no molecule in all of chemistry like water. For example, it is the only substance that becomes less dense when it becomes solid. All other molecules, every single substance in all of chemistry becomes more dense when it becomes a solid. Gas is the least dense. Molecules get closer together when they become liquid. They become even closer together when they become solid. Every other molecule in all of chemistry becomes more dense when it becomes a solid. Water is the only one that becomes less dense. And because of this, it rises to the surface of bodies of water and forms a protective shield that prevents these bodies of water from freezing entirely. No other molecule in all of chemistry has this property. It has an extremely high specific heat. That is the heat required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of substance 1 degree C. That is an extremely high specific heat. It's an enormous latent heat. That's the heat that's absorbed or released during a change in phase. Evaporating water absorbs enormous heat that is released when condensing. It has high surface tension. It is the universal solvent. Almost all biochemical reactions take place in aqueous solutions. And it's able to participate in hydrogen bonding. All of these are essential for life. Life simply could not exist without water. But where did all this life-sustaining water come from? It's a big mystery. Well, it came from meteorites. Not asteroids like this picture shows, but still the same. Meteorites are thought to have deposited the water found on Earth through repeatedly depositing water. Meteorite after meteorite after meteorite managed to deposit all that water here on planet Earth. Well, another very important feature of the Earth is it has a magnetic field. This magnetic field protects things from solar radiation. Without it, life could not exist. Scientists were surprised to discover that the field, however, is quickly wearing down. It's decaying. At the current rate, the field, and thus the Earth, could be no older than 20,000 years old. Several measurements confirm this decay. Since measuring began in 1845, the total energy stored in the Earth's magnetic field has been decaying at a rate of close to 5% per century. Archaeological measurements show that the field was 40% stronger in 1000 AD. Recent records of the International Geomagnetic Reference Field, the most accurate ever taken, show a net energy loss of 1.4% in just 3 decades, from 1970 to 2000. This means that the field's energy has halved every 1,465 years or so. Well, creation physicist Thomas G. Barnes, shown here, a professor of physics at University of Texas for 43 years, proposed that the Earth's magnetic field is caused by freely decaying electric current in the Earth's core. This means that the electric current naturally loses energy or decays as it flows through the metallic core. Though this model differs from the most commonly accepted conventional model, it is consistent with our knowledge of what makes up the Earth's core. Well, since the Earth is believed to be 4.6 billion years old, a rescue device has to be proposed by secular scientists, and this rescue device is known as the dynamo theory, which they assert to provide a self-sustaining mechanism for the magnetic field, a way of rejuvenating the magnetic field. However, this complex process is purely theoretical and contradicts some basic laws of physics. Furthermore, their model fails to explain the modern measured electric current in the seafloor, nor does it explain the past field reversals that are evident by the seafloor. In a book published in 2002 by the U.S. Geodynamics Committee of the National Research Council titled National Geomagnetic Initiative, it is stated, the mechanism for generating the geomagnetic field remains one of the central unsolved problems in geoscience. In his book, Destiny or Chance, Our Solar System and Its Place in the Cosmos, Taylor states that magnetism is almost as much a puzzle now as it was when Gilbert wrote his classic text concerning magnetism back in 1600. Well, reliable published geological field data has emphatically confirmed the young Earth model that a freely decaying electric current in the outer core is generating the magnetic field. In addition, according to the creationist dynamic decay model, The Earth's magnetic field lost more energy during the flood when the outer core was stirred and the field reversed direction several times. The data all points to an Earth and a magnetic field that is only 6,000 years old. Well, in addition to those previously mentioned, there are other factors that point to the Earth being a very, very special place. Of course, the Earth has a magnetic field, but we also have a moon that is at just the right size and just the right distance. Our position in the solar system is just right. Our position in the galaxy is just right, referred to as the habitable zone in both cases. Our sun is the perfect mass and composition. And again, our atmosphere protects us from radiation as well as the magnetic field, but it's also transparent. All of these factors and many more are not only necessary for Earth's habitability, but they're also surprisingly crucial for scientists to measure and make discoveries about the universe. Our atmosphere is tremendously protective, but it's surprisingly transparent. If it wasn't for its transparency, we wouldn't be able to see the cosmos. We wouldn't be able to have discovered that we were part of a solar system and part of a galaxy and that the universe was as large as it is. Well, the moon is exactly the right size for the Earth. Our moon is the 5th largest moon in the solar system, but is by far the largest relative to its planet. For comparison, our moon has a radius of 27% of the Earth. So it's almost 1/4, it's just over 1/4 the radius of the Earth. The next largest moon in the solar system to our own is largest to our own is the Triton moon of Neptune, which has a diameter of just 5.4% of Neptune. So relative to the size of the planet, the next largest to our own has a radius of only 5.4%. Our moon is 27% the diameter of our planet. The moon's diameter is over 50% greater than that of the dwarf planet Pluto, in fact. Well, the moon is at exactly the right distance to create favorable tides. The moon creates a gravitational force that creates the tides and currents that we have for the Earth. It's close enough so that the gravity creates tides and currents in the Earth's ocean, preventing them from becoming stagnant. But it's far enough so that the tides are not harmful to us. The moon's gravity also stabilizes the Earth's rotation and also stabilizes the Earth's tilt, which is responsible for our seasons. The seasons are caused as the Earth, tilted on its axis, travels in a loop around the sun each year. Summer happens when the hemisphere tilted towards the sun, and the winter happens for the hemisphere that is tilted away from the sun. As the Earth travels to the other side of the sun, a different hemisphere is tilted towards and a different hemisphere is tilted away. That's where we get our seasons. The moon is uniquely positioned to serve as signs and to mark seasons and days and years, as it said in the creation account. One way we do that is by observing the lunar shadows, like you see here, which are used to track the progression of time through months. Well, the moon has been intensely studied, both from distance and directly. The moon remains the only astronomical bodies that humans have visited. One of the purposes for most of the missions to the moon, the Apollo missions, was to study the moon, its composition, and in particular, its origin. Well, these missions produced some interesting findings and many surprises. For example, when the Apollo spacecraft traveled to the dark side of the moon, scientists were surprised that the Maria, which are clearly visible on our side of the moon, were conspicuously absent on the other side. Maria, that you see here, stand out as these dark, smooth areas which are distinct from the surrounding surface that is cratered. Maria were partly flooded by lava when volcanoes erupted on the moon, probably as a result of massive impacts that triggered a volcanic flow. The lava then froze, forming these flat, rocky areas. Since that time, meteoroid impacts have created the craters within the Maria, like the one you see here. If the moon were billions of years old, you would expect it to be reasonably uniform. The absence of Maria on the dark side indicates that at one point in time, Fairly recently, the moon suffered a terrible catastrophe. Some have suggested, in fact, that an asteroid shower might have triggered the global flood of Noah. Well, the Apollo 11 shown here was the most famous mission of modern times, during which Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walked on the moon. This may be the most famous photo of all time, showing Buzz Aldrin on the lunar surface. Apollo 11 collected rocks and soil and placed instruments on the moon, including the first of 3 seismometers being placed here. Apollo 15 carried the 3rd seismometer in placement on the moon. After it was deployed, the simultaneous operation of the 3 working instruments permitted calculations of the seismic properties of the lunar interior. In total, the Apollo missions brought back 2,415 samples of rock, 15 rock and soil samples weighing a total of 842 pounds during 6 lunar expeditions from 1969 to 1972. Some of the rocks included Maria basalt from those Maria. Again, those were lava flows. And breccia, formed from pieces of many different rocks that were shattered, melted, and mixed together by the great meteorite impacts that rocked the moon. Well, the main purpose for collecting the rock and soil samples was to help answer the question of how the moon formed through natural processes. The 3 competing theories at the time of these missions were that it formed through accretion. It formed near the Earth as a separate body through this accretion process that I described previously, where dust particles stick together and then become grains that would stick together, and then even bigger grains would stick together, and eventually you would get things like, asteroids, and eventually it could form planetesimals or moons. So some thought it formed through the Earth and the moon formed through accretion separately. So other theory at the time of the Apollo missions was that it formed somewhere else and was captured by the Earth's gravity. The third theory was that it formed as part of the Earth and separated from it by fission. We will discuss each of these theories and see if any of them square with the original facts. Some of the original facts they need to square with is the moon's low density, show that it does not have a substantial iron core like the Earth does. The moon rocks contain few volatile substances, which implies extra baking of the lunar surface relative to that of the Earth. And the relative abundance of oxygen isotopes on the Earth and the moon are identical, which suggests that the Earth and moon formed at the same distance from the sun. So any of these theories will have to account for these facts. Let's take a look. So the accretion theory, which we described previously, a theory proposes that the moon and the Earth condensed individually from the nebula, this swirling cloud of gas and dust that formed the solar system, with the moon forming in the orbit around the Earth. The particles combined due to gravitational attraction, leading to ever larger celestial bodies, and then the moon formed out of the same material as the Earth. This was a very popular theory at the time of the Apollo missions. If the moon formed in the vicinity of the Earth, it should have nearly the same composition, however. The Apollo mission showed that the lunar rocks are different from the Earth's rocks. Specifically, it should possess a significant iron core, and it does not. The physics of 2 objects condensing together is problematic. Also, the hypothetical hypothesis, this accretion hypothesis, does not have a natural explanation for the extra baking the lunar material has received. Also, the moon has a different chemical composition than the Earth, which some scientists believe point to it having formed as a separate body, either near or far, and was captured by the Earth. This is known as the capture theory, which proposes that the moon was formed somewhere else in the solar system and was later captured by the gravitational field of the Earth. The moon's different composition could be explained if it formed elsewhere in the solar system. However, capture into the moon's present orbit is very improbable. Something would have to slow it down at just the right time, and scientists are reluctant to believe in fine-tuning. Also, the hypothesis did not have a natural explanation for the extra baking the lunar material has received. And it violates some of the basic laws of physics. As it approaches, it will speed up. and develops sufficient velocity to escape the Earth's gravity. The energy would need to be reduced somehow. What reduced its speed at just the right moment? Also, the oxygen isotopes are identical on the Earth and Moon, suggesting they formed at the same distance from the Sun. The last theory was the fission theory. The fission theory states that the Moon was originally part of the Earth and separated from it due to the Earth rapidly spinning during its early history. The Pacific Ocean basin is thought by some to be the place where the Moon came from. The theory was thought possible since the Earth's composition resembled that of the Moon's composition resembles that of the Earth's mantle. However, tests of lunar rocks brought back by Apollo revealed that the Moon is relatively deficient in iron. Also, the present-day Moon-Earth system should contain fossil evidence of this rapid spin, and it does not. And like others, this hypothesis does not have an explanation for the extra baking the lunar material has received. Plus, to be possible, the Earth's rotation would need to be incredibly fast. To have spun so fast and flung off something the side of a moon, it would have to be spinning somewhere close to once every 2.6 hours or so, according to physicists. Well, getting a planet spinning that fast from a nebula is already problematic, as we will discuss in a bit when looking at the rapid rotation of Jupiter. But if it was spinning at such a speed originally, that creates another problem: the massive energy dissipation that would have to take place while slowing to its present speed. Baldwin discusses this in his book, A Fundamental Survey of the Moon. He said, if the rotation of the Earth had slowed by tidal friction from 4 hours to the 24 hours that we now have, there would have been a massive energy dissipation sufficient to raise the temperature of the entire Earth by 1,000 degrees Celsius. Such heat would have boiled away all the Earth's oceans. Although it was hoped that the Apollo missions would help solve the mystery of the Moon's origin, the data instead argued against all of them: accretion, capture, fission. Several years after the Apollo program concluded, which was from 1961 to 1972, there was still no agreement about the origin of the Moon. As Barron states in 1975, 3 years after the Apollo missions concluded, he says, in spite of everything that we have learned during the last few years, we still cannot decide between these three theories. We will need more data and perhaps some new theories before the origin of the Moon is settled to everyone's satisfaction. Well, so a new theory has been developed. Yep, that's right. Super asteroid to the rescue, saves the day once again. It is believed that a Mars-sized asteroid impacted the Earth, blowing away a big chunk of the Earth, which then formed by accretion outside of the Earth, leading to the formation of the Moon. NASA's World Book Online Reference Center summarized the theory. Scientists believe that the Moon formed as a result of a collision known as the giant impact, or the Big Whack. According to this idea, the Earth collided with a planet-sized object 4.6 billion years ago. As a result of the impact, a cloud of vaporized rock shot off Earth's surface and went into orbit around the Earth. The cloud cooled and condensed into a ring of small, solid bodies, which then gathered together, forming the Moon. However, there's no proof for this. It's just a story. It's not even necessarily a good story. The only support are computer simulations that require everything to be just right. Also requires the Moon to have formed 4.5 billion years ago at least, at the very birth of the solar system itself. And then again, it doesn't explain why Venus doesn't have a moon if it suffered a similar trauma. Well, we need to keep in mind that these are just theories put forth to answer how these things could form naturally rather than by creation. An analysis of the giant impact and fission hypothesis for the origin of the Moon, published in International Geologic Review, concluded that the origin of the Moon is still unresolved. I think the best explanation of the evidence is that the Moon was created in the present orbit very recently by God. Well, the Apollo astronauts also installed laser ranging retroreflectors. You can see one of them placed here. The first was placed on the moon in 1969 by the Apollo 11 astronauts. Several additional reflectors were placed by other Apollo programs. You see here from this map of the moon where the other reflectors were placed. A11, the numeric A11 shown here is the location for the reflector placed by the Apollo 11 crew in the Sea of Tranquility, one of those Maria. A14 and A15 were placed by later Apollo missions. The L designation on this picture are placements from the Russia-France Lunar robotic probe that placed some reflectors there as well. Well, what these are used for is laser ranging. By beaming laser pulses at the reflectors from Earth, scientists have been able to determine the distance between the two bodies at any point in time to an accuracy of up to 3 centimeters. What they discovered with these measurements was that the moon is moving away from the Earth at a rate of about 4 centimeters per year. However, looking backwards in time, the recession rate was faster than it is now. This is based on physics. It's because the lunar recession is caused by tidal forces. The moon is actually pulling the oceans away from the Earth towards itself and causes the Earth to bulge. This bulge pulls back on the moon, causing it to accelerate. Well, because the moon's gravitational force is stronger the closer you are to it, the moon would have caused larger tidal bulges in the past, creating a greater pulling force, increasing the angular momentum. Thus, the moon receded at a much greater speed, as shown by the red arrows there in the lower diagram. Well, here are the calculated distances looking back in time. The moon is currently 240,000 miles away from the Earth, but would have been at 28.4 miles closer a million years ago. And although the solar system is believed to be 4.5 to 4.6 billion years old, based on the current rate of recession, the moon would have been in contact with the Earth 1.4 billion years ago, based on its present rate of recession. Or, if for those of you that prefer a graphic instead of a table, there you go. Moon, 1.4 billion years ago, boom, go boom. There you go. Yeah, put a lot of time in that graphic. Felt very unappreciated. Well, the moon was truly uniquely designed for us. What we aren't being told about the moon, there exists no sound explanation for its origin. Lunar recession says it can't be billions of years old, but it does. It also doesn't explain that it seems to still be geologically active. It seems to still have a liquid core. There's transient lunar phenomena indicating minor eruptions are taking place through time, which can't happen if it was truly 4.5 billion years old. All right, well, let's take a look at Mars. Mars is the next closest planet to us, and it has also been intensely studied. NASA has sent over 10 spacecraft to the planet Mars, each one at a cost of between $100 million and several billion dollars. The primary mission of these spacecrafts was to find signs of life. NASA's Perseverance rover has become the latest to touch down safely on the red planet, which landed on February 18th, 2021. But it was the third most expensive at a cost of $2.7 billion. $2.7 billion. Still a remarkable feat to be able to land a spacecraft on another planet. Of course, they can't get it back, so they can't retrieve those samples. Trying to work that out, but. Well, NASA's Mars 2020 mission is, this is from NASA's Astrobiology News. They say, NASA's Mars 2020 mission is the next step in NASA's long-term robotic exploration of Mars. The rover Perseverance will provide important data relevant to astrobiology. They're looking for evidence of life on Mars, along with vast amounts of geological information about the landing site and the planet at large that will help put the astrobiological data into context. Perseverance will not be looking for organisms living on Mars today. However, the rover will collect data that could be used to identify biosignatures of ancient microbial life. Why are they looking for life on Mars? Because all attempts to show how life originated here on Earth have ended in failure. And so now they're looking for evidence of life out there in space. Well, Mars is a planet of extremes. It has the largest volcano in the solar system. This is the Olympic Mons, which stands for Mount Olympus. The base of this volcano is the size of the state of Missouri. Massive dust storms come up suddenly in Mars that cover the entire planet. You can see here a photograph on the left from June 26, 2001 and September 4th, 2001. Completely moved and covered the entire planet. Well, these dust storms dramatically affect the temperatures on Mars. These are thermal infrared measurements by a thermal emission spectrometer orbiting Mars. That was aboard the Mars Global Surveyor, and it revealed how the Martian atmosphere was substantially warmed during the ongoing dust storm back in 2001. A planet of extremes. It also has the biggest canyon in the solar system, shown here. This is the Valles Marineris Canyon, which means the Mariner Valley. The canyon extends 3,000 kilometers long, spans as much as 600 kilometers across, and delves as much as 8 kilometers deep. This canyon is the size of the continental U.S. Well, one of the big questions being asked by NASA, again, is an attempt to look for evidence of life is, was there once liquid water on Mars? Because water is required for life. So they're looking primarily for water on other planets. They're looking for signs of carbon on other planets. They have pointed to erosion features like this to claim that it once did. However, we need to keep in mind that both gases and liquids have fluidic properties. They flow and cause erosion in similar manners. NASA has claimed that a geologic feature in this picture, in the Elder's Wald crater, so that I'll circle for you right there a little better, and then I'll enlarge for you here, they've argued that that feature is a delta, a river delta. River deltas are these fan-shaped deposits that are caused when a river carrying sediments slows down substantially when it hits a larger body of water, and its slowing will cause it to dump its sediment load right there. It's been argued that this is perhaps a river delta. However, we have observed gullies, canyons, forming on Mars in the absence of liquid water. In these two side-by-side comparative photos, a gully about 300 meters long formed between July 2002 and April 2005. Geologic features like gullies and canyons are not proof that liquid water has been there in the past, but merely that erosion has happened there in the past. That's all. The reality is there is no evidence that Mars ever had liquid water. Now, evolutionists want desperately to find evidence of water elsewhere because origin of life theories, again, based on conditions on Earth, have all ended in failure. One of NASA's main goals has become the search for extraterrestrial life. They believe life came about by purely natural process and thus must have happened many times during the history of the cosmos, and are therefore quick to interpret data in favor of that view. Liquid water on Mars is simply not possible there today. It will boil away in hours. Recent soil samples by probes found only trace amounts of carbonates, like limestone, that form things like limestone, and instead have found minerals like olivine, which break down in the presence of water. No evidence that Mars ever had water. Well, the current theory is that Mars once had water, once had an atmosphere capable of sustaining liquid water, but an asteroid smashed into it, stripping away its atmosphere. However, the fact is there are other explanations for their evidence of liquid water in the past, and such claims are merely wishful thinking due to speculations that life originated elsewhere in the cosmos. That's all. Well, let's look at the gas giants. The gas giants are the 4 largest planets in the solar system, shown here. That's Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Gas giants are also the largest known types of planets in the universe. I will reveal Earth for a size comparison. From current observations, these planets are largely composed of gas and liquid. On account of their thick atmosphere and their distance from the Earth, however, astronomers do not know whether the gas giants have a solid surface like the terrestrial planets, but it's speculated that they might. Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system. If you look closely on the lower left of this image, you'll see a shadow cast by Europa on the surface of Jupiter. When viewed from Earth, Jupiter appears brighter than most stars. Although the fifth planet from the sun, it is usually the second brightest planet in the sky after Venus. Its composition closely resembles a star, so much so that some authorities hold that if it had been 8 times as massive, it would have become a star rather than a planet. It has 4 large moons and many smaller moons, forming a little miniature solar system of its own. It is famous for the giant red spot, which is a huge storm that has been there as long as we've been able to see the planet up close. Take a look at this comparison of the Earth with the giant red spot. Again, Jupiter's diameter is more than 11 times that of the Earth, 1,300 times its volume. I knew I was wrong about that previous number. It has more than twice the mass of all other planets combined. Despite its large size, Jupiter spins on its axis every 10 hours. That's a speed of 25,000 miles per hour rather than the Earth's 25,000 miles per day. Well, if planets formed through a random accretion in a nebula, how did they start to spin? This is a big mystery. Where did the spin come from in the first place? Well, if you've been paying attention, you might have thought that the theory was related to impacts. Well, the thought is that impacts striking the accreting bodies cause the planets to spin. However, the spinning even once per day is not supported by the physics of the nebula theory. It is theorized that the rotation of planets is a result of impacts, but the nebula hypothesis would suggest strikes hitting randomly on all sides, effectively canceling each other out. You'd have to have consistently non-random striking of planets to get them spinning in one direction. Getting them to spin that fast, very difficult. Richard Kerr states in the journal Science, "We came to the conclusion that if you accrete planets from a uniform disk of planetesimals, prograde rotation just can't be explained. The simulated bombardment leaves a planet spinning once a week at most, not once a day. And remember that Jupiter spins on its axis every 10 hours. To get a planet rotating at this speed requires extremely non-random effects." Jupiter's origin is a mystery, truly. Its composition simply doesn't match the nebula theory. Philip Bell says this in Nature Science Update. Jupiter is the largest of all planets, but results in nature now reveal the embarrassing fact that we know next to nothing about how or where it formed. Well, Jupiter has at least 67 known moons, but the 4 shown here are referred to as the Galilean moons. They're much more massive. They're actually dwarf planet-sized satellites. And as a result, were the first natural satellites of any planet other than the one on Earth to be discovered. They were discovered in January 7th, 1610 by Galileo. This is the Galilean moon called Io. Interestingly, when the Voyager spacecraft flew past Io, it was discovered to be covered by volcanoes. Volcanic eruptions have been seen almost continuously since we've been observing Io. Some extend hundreds of miles into space. Violent volcanic eruptions have been seen almost continuously since we've been observing it. Some, like Io's Vishtar volcano, again, extend hundreds of miles into space. Watch this. This sequence of images was snapped by the probe's long-range reconnaissance imager called LORRI as a spacecraft flew past Jupiter. This is the first ever movie of an Io plume that clearly shows motion in the cloud of the volcanic debris. The problem is that Io is tiny and should be old, cold, and dead, not geologically active, but it is. This is Europa. Europa is the smoothest body in the solar system, composed mostly of ice. A close-up view shows the cracks in its icy surface. This is Callisto. By contrast, it's the most heavily cratered object in the solar system. Both Europa and Callisto are 1/2 ice. However, Europa has a core, Callisto does not. Callisto and Europa are very dissimilar. If these things formed at the same place and at the same time by the same natural process, they should be roughly the same in composition and texture, but they're not. Very, very different. Ganymede is larger than the planet Mercury and has weird, groovy terrain. And note the streak there in the lower left. I'm going to give you another look at that. It's highlighted by these odd streaks that look like someone just took a paintbrush and smoothed out the surface a little bit. Plus, it has a magnetic field that shouldn't be there. Well, what we aren't being told about Jupiter is that it defies the nebula theory. It can't be spinning as fast as it is. Io is geologically active and therefore young. Other moons like Callisto and Europa are very dissimilar. They should be roughly the same in composition and texture, but they aren't. Ganymede can't have a magnetic field, but it does. Saturn is the 6th planet from the Sun and the 2nd largest planet in the solar system. Saturn is a gas giant with an atmosphere predominantly of hydrogen with a small fraction of helium and some trace amounts of several other gases. The most prominent feature of Saturn is its amazing ring system, shown here. This was taken by the Cassini space probe. The particles in Saturn's rings are composed primarily of water ice and range from only microns in size to several meters. Saturn was the first planet observed to have rings. It wasn't until 1977 that it was discovered that Uranus also had rings. Later, the rings of Jupiter and Neptune were also observed. In NASA headline news, the mystery of Adam's rings were mentioned. He is a planetary scientist at NASA's Ames Research Center. Kuzi is. He said this about Saturn's rings. After all this time, we're still not sure about the origin of Saturn's rings. Astronomers once thought that Saturn's rings formed when Saturn did, 4.8 billion years ago, as the sun and planets coalesced from a swirling cloud of interstellar gas. But lately, there's a growing awareness that Saturn's rings can't be so old. There are a number of problems with fitting Saturn into the nebula theory. The rings are bright and shiny, but they sweep up space dust as Saturn orbits the sun, and after a few 100 million years or less, they would have darkened. The moons and rings are exchanging angular momentum. Eventually, the moons will be flung away while the outer half of the rings will fall towards the planet, and they haven't. But scientists know that Saturn is old, so where did the rings come from? You got it. Kuzi again speculates that some hundreds of millions of years ago, a time when the earliest dinosaurs roamed our planet, Saturn had no bright rings. Then he says something unlikely happened. A moon-sized object from the outer solar system might have flown by Saturn, where tidal forces ripped it apart. Or maybe an asteroid smashed one of those Saturn's existing moons. The debris encircled the planet and formed the rings we see there today. Yeah, there you go. Maybe it's one thing, maybe it's another, but you know. Then we have Uranus, another of our gas giants. It has also given astronomers a few surprises. Images from the Voyager spacecraft revealed that Uranus has rings. In addition, Uranus, like Venus and also Pluto, has a rotation opposite of the other planets. Uranus and Venus are retrograde, clockwise, with respect to their orbit. The axis tilts of Uranus and Pluto are also highly inclined. Most planets have an axis tilt near 23 degrees. Venus, you'll remember, is almost perfectly perpendicular to the plane of the ecliptic. Uranus is tilted 98 degrees. Pluto is tilted a full 122 degrees. But the surprise has again been answered. It is believed that a giant asteroid smashed into the planet, knocking on its side. Christian states in Exploring the Planets, models for the development of the solar system cannot produce such an orientation without invoking a collision with another object. Note again, there is no evidence for the collision. It is invoked to account for its highly unusual orientation, but there are too many other features that defy the impact hypothesis. Uranus' orbit is one of the most circular of all planets, only Venus is more circular. Uranus' orbit lies more closely within the plane of the ecliptic than any other planet except for Earth. The moons of Uranus orbit perpendicular to the plane of the ecliptic. Uranus radiates no energy. All the other planets radiate more energy into space than they get from the sun. Uranus does not. And Uranus' axis is also, its magnetic axis is also offset from the center of the planet. Christensen comments about this magnetic anomaly. He said, to the complete astonishment of scientists, the magnetic axis of Uranus, that is tilted approximately 60 degrees with respect to its axis of rotation. It is not known why. Well, taken together, these factors argue strongly against an impact hypothesis to account for its unusual orientation, an orientation which defies the nebula model. And lastly, Neptune, the last of the gas giants. It is the largest, furthest large planet from the sun, 30 times as far away as the Earth. And notice the big spot in this picture that was taken by the Voyager 2 in 1989, similar to Jupiter's, a massive storm. And like other planets, it simply does not fit the model of naturalism. It's supposedly formed billions of years ago, but it's not old, it's not cold, and dead like it should be. It's not dead. That great spot storm disappeared since Voyager took that picture in 1989. It has the most violent winds in the solar system, up to 1,200 miles per hour. And it's not cold. It radiates twice as much energy as it receives from the sun. It was also discovered that Uranus' magnetic field is also tilted and offset. The Journal of Astronomy admits in 2000 that both Uranus and Neptune simply cannot be explained. Psst. Astronomers who model the formation of the solar system have kept a dirty little secret. Uranus and Neptune don't exist. Or at least computer simulations have never explained how planets as big as the two gas giants could form so far from the sun. Bodies orbited so slowly in the outer part of the sun's protoplanetary disk that the slow process of gravitational accretion would need more time than the age of the solar system to form bodies with 14.5 to 17.1 times the mass of the Earth. Again, Duncan in the journal Astronomy says, it is clear that our level of sophistication of studying planet formation is relatively primitive. So far, it's been very difficult for anyone to come up with a scenario that actually produces Uranus and Neptune. Well, remember, according to the nebula theory, every moon or planet formed along similar lines and should not be too different from each other and conform to a single pattern. However, the planets and moons are extremely dissimilar. If we even focus only on their rotations and positions, the differences are enormous. Of the 9 planets, less than half, Earth, Mars, Saturn, and Neptune rotate in a way that would be considered normal. Mercury and Venus are slow. Jupiter is too fast. Venus, Uranus, and Pluto are retrograde. Uranus and Pluto are highly inclined. When we consider their composition also, the dissimilarities are mind-boggling and simply do not fit the models proposed by naturalism. Well, natural science tries to explain away, again, the clockwork precision that governs the cosmos with models, and then account for their uniqueness that defies their models by coming up with a story. They seem to believe that the mere act of coming up with a story proves that it happened. Just that way. It doesn't even have to be a good story. Rather than acknowledge their creator, naturalists would rather cling to a story. Professing to be wise, they have indeed become fools, as it says in Romans 1:20. Well, the Bible is clear that God spoke the universe into existence and upholds it by the word of his power, and did so to declare his own glory and righteousness. It says, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. They have no speech. They use no words. No sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. I'm going to put the quiz up if anyone wants to take a challenge. Let me close this out in a word of prayer. Dear God, thank you so much for the wonders of your creation, Father. When we ponder on all the complexity and design features that have been discovered, we are in awe of the work that you have done. And we are in awe and humbled to know that such time, effort, such ingenuity and thought went into creating this wonderful place for us, to be a habitation for us. But in addition to creating this wonderful world, you created not just a solar system that would host the earth, but vast galaxies beyond our own that declare your glory and righteousness. Father God, we praise you and we thank you. We glorify and honor you. Wonderful is the Lord God Almighty. We praise your holy name. We praise the Lord God. Father, again, we ask for wisdom. Wisdom to help us understand the science, Father God. Help us to understand the science that's being used to challenge your word, to challenge the creation. Help us to understand the science, Lord, so that we may be a better witness for you, Father God. And help us with boldness. Give us boldness, Lord, to speak. That we would not just wait for someone else to give them the truth, to hear the salvation message at church, but that give us boldness to speak, to testify ourselves to those that are around us, to testify to them about the creation, to testify to them that this world did not form all on its own. Look at the world around you. The world is magical in its perfection, in its beauty. A world like ours simply should not exist. We know this, Lord God. This world was made by the hands of an almighty creator. You are that almighty creator, and we praise and glorify and honor you, Lord God. Thank you, Lord God. We praise and thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. Go with God.